I'm Brian Carpenter, host of Fresh Air at 5, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Hey, welcome back. Steve here, and today I'm talking with Brittany Holmes. She is the author of the 212 series. She last appeared on this podcast for episode 331 when we talked about her book, The Writ 212. Now we're talking about the prequel, Second World, Warnings 212. This series is sci-fi and fantasy, but so much of it is highlighting issues of our world, that we're dealing with now in technology, AI, and, more. This is an awesome read. You'll want to know when the next book is coming out, like tomorrow. No pressure, Brittany. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing. And by the way, it'd be so cool if you went to my website, stephenmiletto.com/reviews and left a review. Could you do that? Say a few nice words and how about 5 stars? That'd be so cool. And by the way, that sharing thing, that would be so cool if you reached out to just find one person, a family member, a friend, a colleague, just find that one person who's never listened to my podcast and say, hey, you ought to listen to this podcast. Could you do that for me? You are awesome. Enjoy the show.
You're out to eat now, and you remember there would be this low murmur, right, of like conversation happening. And now I'll look at tables and I'm like, people aren't really speaking to each other. The child's like playing with the phone. And I'm like, what are we doing? It's supposed to be like a social outing. So, and we all talk about it and we see it happening. And then of course, on our end, when you're an educator, you see all the cyberbullying and things. And in my mind, I'm like, just log off. Like, it's just so simple, log off. But these kids are in this world of constantly being part of social media and trying to make a name for themselves this way. And so a lot of those feelings I kind of put into books because you see creativity maybe on the STEM end, but some of their brilliance to me is kind of being impacted by technology in a negative way, to be perfectly honest with you.
It's the Education Podcast, your favorite show, with lots of groovy guests and they share what they know. So crank it up to 10 and let your neighbors know that here's another show with Dr. Steve Miletto. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. Teaching, learning, leading, K-12. With Dr. Steve Miletto.
Brittany Holmes has a passion for educating children. It began with writing on her teacher's chalkboards after school. Her favorite feeling was the silky smooth chalk caked on her fingers. Fast forward many years later, Brittany found herself a mom to Triston, a boy with special needs. Being an educator, she never imagined that she would have a child who struggled academically. Triston is also on the autism spectrum, and Brittany soon realizes the same feelings that were soothing to her growing up irritated her son. As much as she loves Triston, she could not deny the difficulty in raising a child with special needs. A huge support to Brittany was her mom, affectionately known as Nana. Nana doted on Triston and displayed patience with him during the most difficult times. Brittany is the author of a series of children's books called A Boy and His Nana. And they're really cool and great artwork and good, really neat stories. You'll love that stuff. Brittany Holmes also is the author of the 212 series. Brittany has been an educator for over 20 years. She remembers watching a parent trying to register their child for school. In order for the child to be quiet and not bother the parent, the child was handed a device. When the parent wanted their phone back because they had finished registration, the child threw a fit. They screamed and started kicking. The parent handed the device back and immediately the child calmed down. She witnessed many incidents similar to this over the years. So when she started the 212 trilogy, a lot of her personal feelings about technology's impact on people inspired her writing. The first book in the series, The Writ 212, was written and published 7 days before the COVID-19 pandemic shut down the world. Many who were closed in during the pandemic read her first book, The Writ 212, and found eerie similarities to the content and the state of the world, calling the book insightful and ahead of its time. During the pandemic, Brittany released the prequel, The Warnings 212, which delves into the lives of her characters. Again, readers found many parallels to the world's future and the book's contents. Readers of the 212 series share similar concerns about where the world is headed if we continue our dependency on technology. Brittany enjoys writing about her passions and uses both the children's book series and science fiction series to share knowledge, spread consciousness, and build relationships with those who have similar thoughts and experiences. Brittany, thanks so much for being on the show again. Great to have you back. Say hi to everyone.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me back. I enjoyed it. So I wanted to see you again, Steve.
Well, I appreciate it, Brittany. It's awesome to see, and it's amazing how much stuff has gone on since the last time we talked, because we talked during that time as we were entering the pandemic, and it's been a while. So it's
has definitely been a while. We have perfected the whole online situation. We were all learning Zoom at one time, and now we're all pros.
Yes, most definitely. Whether you like it or not, there is this thing in our vocabulary now called a Zoom meeting, whether you're using Zoom or not.
Correct.
Which is nice. So, when we last spoke, you were an assistant principal at Shiloh Elementary School in Gwinnett County, Georgia. All right, you got to catch us up because you've had other things happen.
I have. So I am now a principal at Rosebud Elementary School in Loganville.
Very cool. Congrats.
So that's one thing. And then I got married. So I'm now Brittany Holmes, not Brittany Riddick. So that's been, all kinds of life changes.
Very cool. Congratulations there too. So good stuff. That's it's a lot. Yeah, you had a lot of things going on. So awesome stuff. All right, Brittany. So much has happened since the last time we talked, which was on this podcast episode 331. And to kind of give you an idea, I'm now at like 621. All right. So
wow.
Wow. A little bit of time's gone by, and we've had this, and we talked then about your book, The RIT 212. The episode was posted on July 2nd, 2020. One of the themes has to do with the dangers of technology in our lives. Could you talk about this before we talk about your prequel, Second World, The Warnings 212?
Yeah, so kind of similar to the little blurb that you read, I started noticing a few things just being in schools. I would just write it down like, that's strange. Like, kid just threw a temper tantrum. And it was different than like a tantrum just because you want something. It was like really technology. Like we started switching and it was like the kids were having these breakdowns about not getting computer time. And I was like, this is like, what is happening? And so I kind of logged those things in, and then, you're out to eat now, and you remember there would be this low murmur, right, of like conversation happening. And now I'll look at tables and I'm like, people aren't really speaking to each other. The child's like playing with the phone. And I'm like, what are we doing? It's supposed to be like a social outing. So, and I mean, we all talk about it and we see it happening. And then of course, on our end, when you're an educator, you see all the cyberbullying and things. And in my mind, I'm like, just log off. Like, it's just so simple, log off. But these kids are in this world of constantly being part of social media and trying to make a name for themselves this way. And so a lot of those feelings I kind of put into books because you see creativity maybe on the STEM end, but some of their brilliance to me is kind of being impacted by technology in a negative way, to be perfectly honest with you.
Oh, that's so just right on. I agree with you because there's some of the things my least favorite is when you look and there's a family sitting you've gone out to dinner and they're sitting at the dinner table and all of them are looking at their phones.
Right. And I'm like, come on, talk to each other. And sometimes I just sit there and I'll just do like a countdown, like when are they going to look up? And they don't look up.
No,
Food comes and I don't even know if they look up at the waiter. They just keep going.
Right, exactly. It's crazy. And it's, one of there's so many different things out there, but the technology, this whole thing, because we weren't talking then about AI. I mean, if we were, it was, people just talking about when or this or that. Now our world's just filled with this thought of what AI is or isn't. And, some people worry.
Yeah. And as
completely.
an educator, I'm so torn, right? Because we're moving into that direction and the push is to incorporate it in classrooms. And, you just have to kind of be a little safe with it. And that's why I was like, I think I told you earlier, I was like, I got to get the book out because I had a lot of thoughts prior to some of these concepts becoming mainstream. Even 3 years ago, some of this stuff wasn't as mainstream as it is now. So I was like, I got to get it out there. And then fingers crossed, somebody from Netflix will come and say, this is beautiful. Let's put this on TV. Nice.
Awesome. It's coming. It's going to happen. It's good.
Yes, there we go.
Good stuff. Well, it's just so much where we see this with the technology. I mean, because you have things in your book that are references to, and whether it's quite there yet or not, now with AI, yeah, I think we're getting even closer because, like, my favorite is the sidewalks that tell you about things to purchase and stuff like this, and it's one of the things, stores and things like this that you can walk into and purchase, and that we have right now, where it's
right.
identify with your phone. You walk in there, you pick stuff up and walk out, and it charges it to your phone. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and so the concept in the book is so similar, and it is more along the lines of most of the people in my book by this time, for various reasons, have been chipped. And so just being able to walk in and out of a store without waiting in a line. So now you can just scan whatever's in your basket, and your body is a human computer. So it just deducts it from your physical person. And so some of the people, I think, walk out, push a cart out, and that's it. You're charged.
It's amazing.
You're done.
It's amazing how close we are to that, because we're,
right.
We have Elon out there talking about chipping people to do
right.
different things.
And I think it's going to catch on. It's, right now you have the backlash of people saying, no, we don't want it. And, two different camps. But I think technology is moving faster than we're able to protest. So,
yeah, it's I'm a big I love sci-fi. I've watched and read and all kinds of stuff over the years, and I'm a little sure we're getting pretty close to Terminator land right now.
So, right, that's what it feels like. Absolutely, yes. Absolutely.
At some point, so get into the stuff that you're writing about, where you're a little worried about what's going on, what people are listening to. Because I got to say this, right now we're going to get to a question about this in a minute, but every day you hear somebody say, I'm pretty sure my phone or speaker's listening to me, because it keeps
right. Absolutely.
and they're like, no.
It's happening now. Like, I think right before here, I drove through Panera and got something to eat real quick. And the next thing I know, I picked up my phone, and the Panera, all I did was drive through the line and order at Panera. And I'm sure they heard me order from Panera. And then all of my feeds are like coupons. And I was just like, this is getting creepy.
Right. It's not listening. No, it just so happens that it gave you those coupons. Nice. Yes, that is that world we're in. Very cool. Well, maybe not very cool, depending on where it's going.
Depends.
Yes. All right. So Second World, The Warnings, is a prequel. Why'd you stop moving forward to share the past?
So the intent of the books was always to kind of write the one in the middle first, because I always thought it would be kind of cool to allow readers to connect to some of the readers in the first world that the second world is what I call it. And then in the future. So you'll get a little bit of glimpse of both. And I thought that right now, with as fast as the world is moving, going to the third book that is going to be a little bit more fantasy than sci-fi was probably not the best move, because like I said, it's moving so fast. A lot of this stuff I wrote 3 years ago prior to becoming a principal, kind of paused for a minute, did not realize pandemic would happen. I became a school principal. That was extremely busy, and a lot of things happening. But when I picked it back up, I was like, girl, you better write fast, because they are working. So I wanted to make sure that I developed this world that still felt futuristic, but that wasn't, it still is like just that one notch ahead of where we are in some areas, but you can see it. You can relate to the fact that, oh, this is happening. We're about to be there. So I thought that was really important. And then I think too, the characters are really struggling with a lot of the things that we're struggling with right now. So I thought it would make it very relatable. It
very much does. Very much does. I got to tell you, yes, and scary does, by the way.
Right.
So, all right. So make sure that at this point, can you explain Second World and YSW? Because this was a big part of your first book.
Right.
And now it really comes forward, and you understand a lot of what you're talking about in your prequel here. So can you talk about those things?
So the first thing was to take feedback. So when I wrote the Writ 212, which was the first book release, and in my mind, that was the book in the middle of the series, and you receive feedback, it was really important for me to go back, edit, kind of define some things for the readers based on what I was hearing. And so when I did the prequel, you can kind of see the uprising of all the things that are mentioned in the Writ, right? So in the Writ, there's a lot of mention. You hear the YSW, you hear these people are upset with the YSW, and the YSW is nothing really more than almost like this pop culture group. So you have that elders who are more mature people who may not necessarily use technology as much. And then you have the YSW who they are all techie. They are all in. Everything is like super cool to them. And they're smart in their own way because they know how to use this technology. They're well versed in this technology. And so they're just part of this culture. And they celebrate this guy named Dietrich Dollard because Dietrich Dollard is almost like like you said, Elon Musk of today, right? So this man is like creating all of these amazingly cool things. And so they celebrate him. And somebody asked me, they were like, well, is he the ruler of the world? No. But he is so powerful because he works behind and he does the security systems and all of the technology for the computer systems and phones and apps. And so eventually, like, he becomes the person that pretty much controls the world because he controls all the technology, even though he's not the face of, the leader of the world. So the YSW really, really praise and celebrate him in a way, like he's almost this untouchable person because they think he's so brilliant. And I call them youth of the second world because as you read the book, you'll see like undertones of spiritual stuff from the Bible. And so if you do read the Bible, you'll know that the first world was destroyed in the flood, right? And so technically we're living in the second world, the second world that was created. And so this is that young group of people who love technology and are just, if you read the book, it always feels like it's always busy. Like they're upset about something, they're protesting things, they stand on their platforms. And so even now when I watch social media and I see everybody has a platform for something and they're using technology and social media to kind of just always voice their opinion, I just think the noise is going to get louder. And so that's that group, that's that YSW Youth of the Second World, like chanting that on.
Very cool. Very cool. One of the things I gotta say here and commend you for is that, something that really had to inspire you to write this series because, a lot of people have ideas, but those ideas never become a book. And,
right.
And you have 2 books here and the third one. And at the same time, you're an educator and now a principal. And so you've got all these other things that could be interfering with it. So, so how did it become a book? I mean, how did you take the idea? What inspired you to really see it through?
So like I said, the first book came and I was really just jotting down like things, like ideas, almost like a little journal. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just saw a kid throw a tantrum because they couldn't get on the computer today. Or I would write things down that like sometimes would break my heart. Like, why aren't parents talking to their kids anymore? Those kinds of things. So that's kind of where that started. And then once I got the first book out, so COVID actually helped me kind of get the first book out, which is crazy. It's crazy because there was this shift in how we were doing things and we were trying to figure so much out at the time. And so I was actually polishing up some things while we were not necessarily in person and, that kind of thing. And then the second book, I just kind of fell right into it. I was like, don't stop writing. I kept hearing people say, don't stop writing, just write it down, just keep writing, like just write it. And then what I did was I said, but try to write it with the feedback in mind that everyone gave you. So that way your first draft is a better draft than your third draft of the first book, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. Makes very good sense.
So I was like, do it like this, and then we'll keep going through it and we'll reread and we'll reread. Well, I became a principal, and so that kind of got put down for a little while. And but it was me watching like certain things happen. I said, oh my God, I wrote about this. And I was getting jealous. I was like, I don't want these people watching Netflix or these series and think I didn't think about it. I had these thoughts too. So it kind of put me in the hyperdrive. So I have to definitely give a shout out to people being patient with me, being newly married and having a husband, and then kind of saying, I got to write a book. He's like, what in the world is happening? But
nice.
just people being patient with me. But believe it or not, I can get a lot of it done because I don't watch a lot of TV and I
Nice.
don't do a lot of social media. So
Very cool. So that's a good
yeah,
advertisement for that. That's
yeah,
nice. Kudos to you too. All right. So let's talk about this world that you have, because one of the things that becomes very apparent immediately in this book, the Second World, the Warnings, 212, the prequel, is that there's a lot of concern that people can hear what they're talking about or thinking about,
right.
that so they got to be careful about what they say. And it is kind of funny because in a world right now where a lot of us are questioning whether our smart speakers and our phones actually
Right.
know more about us than what the companies keep saying, no, 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 just keep on talking. We're good. Can you talk a little bit about, what this, why are they concerned? What's that all about?
Right. So what is interesting is I had a few people read the book and they kind of shared with me what the world felt like to them reading the book. And it's always interesting to hear it from another perspective because as I'm writing, I feel like I see the things, but I'm wondering if they can, see what
Oh
I'm
yeah.
writing. And so they were like, I picture a lot of color and I picture it being very vibrant, which is interesting because they also mentioned this like dull orange hue that's constantly kind of around because the world is kind of polluted by this time and things just aren't as clean and clear. But there's this vibrant color because you're the book takes place in the city. So some people ask me, where does 212 come from? 212 was a number that kind of, I felt like God just gave me that number. And then as I started reading through it and reading the meaning of 212, like 212 is a boiling point. Like that's the last temperature degree before you hit boiling. Like that's right at the cusp of the end of the world, right? And then 212 is also, if you notice, they talk about area code a lot in the book, but it is the area code for Manhattan. And so just picturing like a city that's really super vibrant, that's got a lot going on, but also has these screens that aren't working just one way. It's not that you're just watching the screen is watching you. The book starts off with this new surveillance. And the image I was trying to create was we're already being watched, right? But you have these groups of people that feel like it's invasive. And so what they do, they make cute little birds that are perched on lamp, like street light posts and on trees, but they have these glowing blue eyes and they're watching you. And so, but if you make it look like a bird, then it's more acceptable to like spy on people. And you have all of these little things that are kind of flying around. Like I think it gets to the point where one of these things like flies in the window because of a family because they're supposed to be on silence hours. And when the thing flies in, it's looking to see if you're actually talking at the time. And so the world, it feels very monitored, like, and there is a group of people that are allowed to have a little more freedom, and that is the YSW. But not if you read the book, you also realize that what the YSW are or on these layers of social class. And so the world is very unique in the fact that you also have elevations that allow you to know that you're a little bit higher class. And so you're actually elevated above. Like I described them driving. Like Solomon, the main character, is walking, and a lot of people are walking around and is constantly busy. But if you have a little bit of money, then you can fly at this altitude, and you have a little more money, you can fly at this altitude and there's less air traffic in those areas. And then Dietrich Dollard, who's super wealthy, he lives far above that. So I wanted to create a world that is not only like horizontal, but vertical. And, you really get a sense of all the dimensions and what that means in terms of social class.
Very cool, because you really do get a feel for that, and it's very stratified, and it's kind of ominous about how the YSW has way out of, all you got to do is, and I won't go into too much detail here because I don't want to give away things, but there's just all you got to do is just whatever it is, type thing,
Right.
and not
Sign
to give
on
that
the
away.
dotted line and it's all yours. You can
Right.
have all the riches of the world, right? And so that's one of those things that even the main character kind of struggles with that from time to time.
Which is which is really, it really makes you feel kind of this place they're in, where, you know, this feeling that I don't want to do that because I need to, you know, I want to be my own person type thing. But yet,
Right.
there's an ominous tone here when you
Right.
don't follow the rules, I guess.
Right. And he's in constantly being watched, and you know, down to everybody knowing who is part and who is not a part. And even though people have different chips or things in their arm, they know they can track who is and who isn't. And Solomon struggles with that because his family is trying to kind of hold on to those core values, but the world around them is just inundated and is so far gone. And you know, it creates rifts within his own family, trying to, you know, explain to people why he can't have or do certain things that everybody else can do.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
It's in that little blue light. You know, there's
Right.
multiple
Constantly
conversations
looking.
about look, the lights on. There's the lights on. You know, it's like
Right. Right.
ooh, you know, Big Brother is watching you. Yes, and
Big Brother is watching. It becomes very, you know, they're always being watched, but when that blue light is on and they have this new ordinance that's like, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. But it becomes almost like that's something we say, but in the book it becomes almost creepy, right? Because
right.
if you're talking, you can be met with severe consequences.
Which is scary stuff. There's, you know,
Yeah.
just a side note. There's a whole thing about the punishment for using paper. So I thought that's
Right.
an interesting thing too.
Right. And it's crazy. Again, like we did this a long time ago, and I used to like, I think it came again, work inspires a lot. So I'm in there scanning in stuff, right? I'm scanning in documents because we don't want all this mess, like piles and piles of paper.
Right.
And of course my mind is like, but what eventually we'll be in a place where nothing is paper. Can we track like what it originally said? How do we know like things are changing over time? Like there's things I'll look up and then I'll go back and I was like, I don't think that's what I remember. And it's happening already, you know. I think there's this thing that they'll ask like old symbols or like commercials, and the whole world has this memory of a commercial being a certain way. And then they'll say, nope, this is what it really said. I'm like, no, it wasn't. Get a massive group of people like this to remember a certain thing a specific way, and you're saying it was different. So it's kind of scary, but yeah, paper is illegal in this second world.
Yeah, that's wild because, you know, some of what you're talking about is the whole thought that all these people can remember it wrong. I mean, you know, that's
Right.
one of the things we do it with lyrics, we do it with situations, and there's a lot of studies now that talk about how people, you know, as time goes on, you swear this is how it happened, but it turns out
Right.
that you're
It's
missing
so
some stuff
funny
in it.
to me.
Yeah, and so one of the things like you're talking about is that I think people a lot of times get you know, the two very memorable sentences from the original Star Wars movies. One is a Yoda-ism, and one is a Darth Vader comment. And
Right.
there's something about the one is the comment about how he says the whole thing about him being his father. And
Right.
then
Right.
and
right.
it's just funny how we all have this disease, which we get it wrong. You know, it's like
Right.
nice.
And
So,
then you wonder if that's true, or are things kind of being manipulated slowly but surely over time. And so in the book, that's kind of one of the concepts, right? And so if you have a certain amount of wealth, you can order and have the printed copies of things. And so there's a character that actually lets us see some of the changes that have occurred over time because they have that wealth. But yeah, I do feel like slowly but surely you just change a couple words here and there, and it can change the entire meaning of something. And so, you know, I think in some ways it becomes something that we just need to be aware of, that as history is written, are we making sure that it was written accurately? Do we remember?
That's a good point, because it's like one of the things that's definitely in there. I mean, when the one character lets the character Solomon see the two different books on multiple topics, where
Right.
there's stuff
Right.
that's changed from this copy.
And you
from
can
one
see
time
the
ago.
new the people who are now in place, right? That they become the hero of of the story, even though that's not necessarily how it originally was written.
Right. That's very scary. That's one of the things that I got to make sure we talk about is your characters try avoiding something that is called a YSW discount, and some of them want to live without. Can you talk about the discount and what comes with it? Because it's kind of an ominous part of it.
Right. So I will tell this part of the story. So Solomon has a really good friend, and him and his friend were like the last two that hadn't given into the YSW. And again, that is almost like this like pop culture group, right? And you become, once you kind of allow yourself, and in most of the ways, it's basically like another version of a chip. So everyone at once and now is chip. Like even Solomon is, but he doesn't have a chip that actually lets people know. And I'm touching my arm because in my mind that's where they were put in their arm. But he doesn't have the chip that lets them know he's part of the YSW. And so like when we talked earlier about him checking out of stores, like he doesn't get the discount. They know his chip, they know he's not one of them. And so his bill is 3, 4, 5 times higher than everyone else. And so he has this friend that he works with at Readers Publishing that one little subset that allows printing to happen. And his friend gives in. And he says, hey, I can't do this anymore. I'm not making good money. They promised me more money, and I think it was even for doing something like bringing coffee. Like it wasn't like a big job, but he's going to make a lot more money because he's one of the last people to give in. And he says, and I got this perk, like they're letting me get trips and all of these other things. And he says, and I'll let you borrow some of my perks. And so Solomon's like, oh, this is going to be great because he hasn't done anything with his family in a long time. We'll go to Clearwater Beach because all the water was yucky, but if they could elevate themselves into this different, atmosphere, he can actually see this beautiful beach. And so he takes the perk, and the YSW find out about that. And it's almost like you're getting the perk without being a member. It's kind of like going to Sam's Club right now. There are people standing at the door of Sam's Club checking your card. Yes. Like the problem with that is, say I just wanted to go to Sam's Club to look, and maybe I might end up getting my Sam's Club card afterwards, but they are not letting you into Sam's Club right now unless you actually show them the physical card. And so that's very much like Solomon is using the perk, but he wasn't the member. And once the YSW find that out, it is all eyes on him. There are people and birds and eyes looking at him from all different directions. And then he's starting to get lots of digital messages and mail that kind of, let him know, like, you owe us some money, or you can sign now. You can give us your fingerprint, your digital message, your signature, and we'll let it all go. And he struggles with that almost through the entire book.
Yeah, it's very powerful, especially with just different things in our world where it makes you think about everything from Owen to the company store type thing to
right.
It's a scary stuff, especially that they don't appreciate the fact that you're borrowing or using somebody else's or something like this, and you can cause a lot of problems.
Right.
One of the things that as your chapters throughout your book, whenever there's a new chapter, you have a warning that comes from the writ. And can you explain what the writ is and who Ja is?
Yes. So like I've said a few times throughout like our conversation, I do feel like it's a spiritual book in some way, right? And so even though it's science fiction, the writ is almost like the second world's version of the Bible. And the writ actually carries on throughout my original book that I published, which is the middle book in the series. And that is really their guide. That is what they're supposed to be reading. That is what they're supposed to be using, not only in the second world, but when they wake up and start the new world, that's what they're supposed to be using. Well, Ja is in this book like God for them. So even I think there's a scene in there where Solomon is being chased, and he's like, "Oh, Ja, Ja, Ja." It's like us saying, "Oh, God, 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 please don't let this happen," right? And so that is him. And it's funny because he does not really have a very strong relationship with Ja at first, and it is through his gift that he develops a relationship with Ja. But Ja had given him this gift from childhood. He had visions, and all the time these things would be coming true. He didn't really know how to interpret these things, but he would get all these glimpses of things to come. And Ja gave him that as a gift so he could start being aware of how the world was going to come to an end. But yeah, the writ is the warnings is like all the things that is starting to happen in the end of the second world. And so the warnings is like a section of the writ that is like, okay, beware of. They're all these like beware, and they should kind of allude to what's going to happen in the chapter next.
And by the way, as you get deeper and deeper into the book, much of that is, there's trouble.
Right. Beware. Something's going to happen,
Yes, exactly.
And
I like that.
In the writ, it's similar, and that's one of the things like I think I talked to you about earlier was like editing the book and just kind of getting that same flow, because the writ is mentioned a lot in my first book. It's called the writ, but I like the structure of like giving each chapter like almost like a scripture per se that kind of tells you what's going to happen. And in the writ, it'll be a little bit different than the warnings, because the warnings is all about how the second world is coming apart. And so the writ will actually, if you have read the first book, it's chapter 212 that's written, that is like, this is your directions for how to live in this world. And so I'll try to structure it very similar to how I did this book.
That's excellent, because it really reads well, because it's like, okay, so there's trouble coming, but then when you get the warning from the writ that kind of lays it out that,
right.
You got a lot of trouble coming. So
yeah.
I like that. One of the things that this world is filled with technology that talks with people using it, which I think is funny. One of the devices, likes the fact that somebody actually thanks them.
Right.
Thanks it and still says thank you to them. I think that's how you write it, something like that. And, one of the, what do you share a lot about this technology, and we're so close to it.
We are so close
to this type of stuff. And it's like, can you just talk a little bit about where you're kind of going with, because there's good and bad centered here. I mean,
right.
I'm pretty sure I'd get annoyed if my, my door kept thanking me, or, glad that I used it or something like this, or whatever, but, or, cabinets or any other number of things. And, right now, a lot of people think it's cute to make, one of those smart speakers, because they've programmed it that if you say thank you to it, it might say something. It'll recognize the words. It might say something to you like, "You're welcome," or it might say, "That was very nice of you to thank me," or something like that. It's all.
Yeah. It's a weird place, because it's almost like this false sense of being courteous or kind, because it's not coming from any place other than programming, right? But the genuine empathy or appreciation of the words is not there. You're talking about, so Solomon has a doorman, and the doorman is now AI, and he actually talks about a little bit about when he was replaced. Like, he knew the difference. He looked exactly like the real doorman, except for he had those piercing blue eyes, and so I think that's the guy he says thank you to. And then there's an elevator too, like that appreciates them saying thank you. And I think we're programmed in this place where they're creating the devices to make you feel, well, it's almost like talking to a real person, and I think that can get super scary if we don't realize that this is all programming, and it becomes very fake. It's not genuine. It's not real. So just watching some of those things.
Yeah. And that's what I love about where you're going in your writing. Cause it's like, it is scary stuff, because if you don't stop to go, yeah, this is programming, 'Cause
Right.
there's stories all the time right now about how people are having relationships. I know
Right.
with AI, and it's like,
Right.
really? Okay, yes.
Really, are they? And then what does that say? Like even in the book, they celebrate the first marriage between human and AI, and it's
Yes.
this big celebration in one of their little news flashes, and so it's interesting. And even one of the characters, the children have a character, friend, bully friend bully, named Norman, and Norman is a mean dude, but then you get to see why he's kind of the way he is, because his parents lock him up in a dome, and he actually attends school virtually. He doesn't. His physical body is never out of this dome. He is sent virtually into a school setting.
That would be wild. That would be messed up.
Right.
So it's you got a lot of stuff going on, and I love this because it reads really well, and it makes you want to read more, and you get a little paranoid that maybe Brittany is a soothsayer for the for where we're going, because it's like because some of this stuff, it's one of the things that you get into is these different apps, and
Right.
I'm not going to mention what one of the characters does with them, but if you just think about the names, one of them is called the Vaporizer,
Right.
and,
Right.
and one of them is a time snatcher. Yes, not just
A time snatcher. The time snatcher one was so much fun to write for me, because I've said this out loud, and then I was like, that's kind of weird. So I've been like seeing, like, I have so many things I feel like that I'm trying to do, right? And I want to be good in all of those things. And then I can look at people who are just like chilling, they're watching TV or like whatever, right? And then you'll hear them say, oh, I just don't have time to get it done. And I'm like, oh my God, if I could just snatch the time away from you, I would just actually use it. And so that became the idea for that, was,
Nice.
boy, if there was ever a time where I wish I could take an app, I would love to. Everybody who says they don't have time and they're wasting time, I don't have enough hours in the day to get everything done. So that was a fun one to write. The vaporizer, I think the kids in the story had, they did a little too much with that one, but they definitely had fun with it. But I think my favorite was Time Snatcher. And if anyone reads the book, you'll see why it became an important app to use.
Very much so. Very much so. Cool stuff. So because there's a whole bunch of worlds here. There's adults. I mean, even though you have the world, you've got the adults and you've got kids, and
Right.
the kids are having to deal with some stuff that's
Right.
pretty serious, as much as the adults are having to deal with it. Plus, each of the adults and the kids have the people that they have to deal with.
Right.
So,
You got your protagonist, antagonist. You got all the people in there, and I don't know who's listening to this right now, but you would have to read it because it all comes together. Like, I'm sure it sounds like, what is this girl over here talking about? All these different technology things, but I think if you read it, you can see where all the pieces fit together, and it's like, oh my gosh, this could actually happen.
Very much so. Very, very much so. It's there's a lot of very scariness. Good. This is good. I mean, I think you've done a really good job with this, Brittany, and I think that
I appreciate it.
And it really you develop feelings for the characters. That you want it to work out. You want it to do right, and things to happen that way, and that just speaks highly to how you're writing and such. One of the things that I got to make sure that I talk about here is that before we go, is that you've got this whole focus. You got this and the warnings, and this is as a prequel, and you're talking about the characters and things going on. Let's put it all together and do a commercial for us for why the listeners should read.
Why listeners should read. If you are at all a conspiracy theorist, or you think the world is going down the tubes right now, this could be the book for you, because you might say, oh my gosh, this is actually happening.
Nice.
And and it actually my real goal with any of this, and I do practice this, is to really hope that people would spend a little more time with their families and less time with technology, and building what is real and not getting caught up in this world that really does not matter at the end. And in this book, you see all of that stuff, none of it mattered at the end. And so hopefully people will come along and do that. And that's why I say 212. I try to do 2 hours and 12 minutes of the day. I'm making my poor new husband, he's like, oh my gosh, she has all these weird things that she does. But 2 hours and 12 minutes of the day, just completely disconnected and doing something. I don't care if it's like walking or just be disconnected. Like just be disconnected. Let your mind think. Let your mind be free of all the words that come through technology. And then I think you'll reconnect with all your brilliance.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. That is awesome. Brittany, as we're closing up, if someone wanted to find out more, reach out to you, connect with you, where would you send them?
Well, there are several places. So I have my website, bnholmes.com, that you can find information on. That'll also connect to my email, which is contact@bnholmes.com. And then if you're looking for a book, I'm on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And of course, you can order through the website.
Very cool. And I'll have that information in the show notes, so it's easy to find and easy to do. I got one last question for you, Brittany. It goes like this. How did you create the world where your characters live? I mean, did you do anything special to make sure that you kept your characters and their roles consistent? Because it is, and it feels very real.
Well, yes. So outlining is great. And honestly, feedback is so crucial. And that's, I think, kind of offline, we talked, if I could tell my students anything, I think taking feedback, not being offended by feedback, taking the feedback, listening to people, because they will become attached to characters. And so there's going to be an expectation of how a character should act or how they should behave or respond. And I think one of the reasons why my writing was better this time and the world was better this time was because of the feedback. I remember when I wrote my first book, the person told me, I could tell when you knew who your characters were. And it took a while for me to speak and think and act like the characters. And now I'm in a place where my mind, if I'm switching characters, my mind shuts off from one and I think through the lens of the other one. And so just making sure you take the feedback, creating outlines of characters is really good, from their physical description. And I was real careful not to put physical description things in here. I might talk about eye color or belly size or something like that, but I was real, I think the political place that we're in, I was like, let me not attach skin color. Let me let people just kind of put whatever physical attributes they want to see. But I think it is important just to define them and kind of start thinking with their mind, right? So kids, if you're out there, if anybody's listening, like feedback is critical. Making sure that you're listening to people as they say, I thought that character would have done such and such because of how you wrote them. Just making sure you stay in that same vein and then write down how they respond. If they're a little snarky, if they're a little angry, if they're a little snippy, whatever their attribute is, make sure that you write through that lens so that way it feels consistent.
Awesome. I love that advice. That is so cool. And it's just definitely shows. And especially, what a great thing not to write descriptions, because then we get to use our imaginations. It's how we think of it as opposed to being told how to think. Hey. Yeah.
And I think you give, in that book, I wanted to give just enough, but I loved one of the people came to me and said, what's funny? You didn't put skin color, but I wasn't even picturing like typical skin color. They were like, some people I saw was yellow and green and purple. And
nice.
And so that was interesting to me because that's where their mind let them go with that.
Very cool. That's the way it should be. So you can, it's your own thoughts about it. And
right.
I think you have one of your characters talk about the need for free will. So
right. Right. Absolutely.
I like that. Awesome stuff.
Enough. Yeah.
I love it. Brittany, thank you so much for sharing your book, Second World, The Warnings 212. Losing our ability to live our lives is scary. The thought that our free will become non-existent is even more so. You got that right. And you've created a storyline that connects so closely with so much of our world today. Kudos to you. Looking forward to reading more and wishing you all the best in what you do.
Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll see it on TV. I'm waiting for somebody to come and pick this book up and get it on Netflix.
Nice. Next step. I like that. Good stuff.
All right. Thank you so much for meeting with me today. I enjoy it every single time.
Hey, you have been listening to Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12, a podcast to help you help kids achieve their dreams. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is a member of the podcast network based in Canada called Voice Ed Radio. Voice Ed Radio, your voice is right here. The opinions expressed on Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 are those of the guests and host. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is intended to share ideas, advice, and suggestions. Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 is produced for educational purposes. Hey, thanks for listening. It would be awesome if you visited my website at stephenmiletto.com and connected with me, left a review, and listened to more episodes. And by the way, you could also share it with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues. Thanks so much. You're awesome.